Hello and welcome to Adobe Photoshop Basics. We will get started in just a minute. Okay, we are going to go ahead and get started, I think. Welcome and thank you for coming to Photoshop Basics. This program is suitable for adults and teenagers. My name is Anna Kopinska and I am assisted today by Nikki. Hello. Nikki will be our chat moderator, so if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or the Q&A function. Okay. So we are going to dive right into what we're going to be doing in today's class. We are going to talk about what is Adobe Photoshop. We're going to talk about different types of edits, and we are going to actually demonstrate some of the features of Photoshop, such as adjustment layers, saving and exporting, basic image manipulation, and image retouching. We are going to share some additional resources with you, and we will conclude the program. So, as a class disclaimer, I am not an Adobe expert. They keep coming out with new things pretty much every week that it's very, very hard to keep up with. Um, the purpose of this class is to provide a general overview of Adobe Photoshop and demonstrate some commonly used tools. Information in this program is accurate as of the time of this program. However, there is going to be a recording on YouTube as well. So if you're watching the YouTube recording, the information may not be accurate. For Adobe expertise, you can utilize LinkedIn or Udemy, which are both a video tutorial websites, resources that are free with the Plano Public Library card. And we'll discuss how to access these at the end of class. You can explore more about Adobe software by making a reservation to use the digital creation space in order to use the software. Every library has an Adobe Creative Cloud computer, and three of them have digital creation spaces. The three that have a digital creation space are Parr, Harrington, and Haggard. Last but not least, you can register online at planolibrary.org for more information. So, what is Adobe Photoshop? Photoshop is an image manipulation software, part of the Adobe Creative Cloud. It is used to create and enhance photographs, illustrations, and 3D artwork. Photoshop has many functionalities, and the two most used are photo editing and digital art creation. One thing to note is that Photoshop is raster or pixel based. So when you zoom in on an artwork, kind of like we're zooming in on this flower right here, you can see the square grid. These are called pixels, and Photoshop works usually by manipulating the image pixel by pixel, although there are ways to do multiple pixels at a time. So editing in Photoshop can directly change the pixels in an image, or editing can change the layers that sit on top of the original like a filter. Using layers can allow changes without changing the base image in some cases. So some edit functions must be done on the base layer. So duplicating the original layer can preserve an unedited copy. And I like having multiple layers of the original just so that I can see the before and after. With that, we are going to dive right in to the demonstration. Um, my coworker Nikki is going to send you a link in the chat to this Google Drive right here. Here is where you can access the exercise files so that you can follow along, as well as a handout if you would like to practice and print it out later for your future reference. Mhm. To open Photoshop, I'm going to click on this little rainbow icon for Adobe Creative Cloud. And there are the shortcuts, which allow me to open Photoshop. If you don't see Photoshop in your shortcuts, you may also have to look at the apps. And this should show you every app that is included in the Creative Cloud plan. So we can open Photoshop. It takes it a second because Photoshop is a very big, powerful program. So just bear with me while it loads. There it is. Okay. So when you open Photoshop, you might see something similar to this. Um, and getting started, we're going to start just with photo manipulation. And there are two main ways of opening a photo in Photoshop. So even before we opened Photoshop, I could have gone to my exercise files folder, which opens here. And I can right click on it and say open with, and then Adobe Photoshop. This will open it in Photoshop, but for the sake of argument, if I do not want to do that, I can click on the Open tab in the upper left corner, and I can navigate to my folder, which it already is navigated to, and I can select the first file that we are going to open, which is #1 beach. Okay. So as you can see, this is a photo that needs some work. It's very, very dark. It's a beautiful sunset, but there's not a lot of detail that we can see of this little lifeguard station, um, or anything else really. But before we dive into that, I wanted to go over the basic layout of Photoshop. So up top here, where we see File, Edit, Image, and so on, this is called the menu bar, and it features standard menu options. Underneath, we have the options bar, and the options bar is going to change based on whatever tool we have selected from this toolbar on the left side. So as you can see, I'm clicking the various uh, tools, and my options bar is changing based on that tool. We have our workspace options, which is way over on the right underneath the X. And you can see that I am set to essentials. Um, there are different workspaces that usually work really well for other purposes. So for example, there's the photography workspace. And what the workspace will do is it will rearrange everything a little bit so that the tools that you most need are not hidden under sub menus. So for example, for painting, we have our swatches, we have our brushes over in our panels on the left side. However, I'm not painting today, so I'm just going to stick to essentials. These panels can be customized. You can see that there are multiple panels here, and I can adjust how big or small they are. And I do want to adjust these because I want to open up my layers. There we go. Um, There are three divisions in the essentials category. So we can work in color, swatches, gradients, or patterns in this first section, properties, adjustments, libraries in this second section, and then layers, channels, and paths in the third bottommost section. We're primarily going to be working with layers and perhaps some in properties and adjustments. So As we talked about a little earlier, there are two main ways of editing in Photoshop. There is the way to overwrite the pixels directly, and then there are layers, which are kind of like transparencies if you're old like me and remember those in school. Um, and they just stack on top of each other, kind of like layers in an onion. And we are going to actually talk about adjustment layers first, which are a non-destructive way to edit aspects of your photo, such as brightness, contrast, levels, hue, saturation, color, etc. So we are going to go over into the panels and look at adjustments. You can see that there are some preset adjustments, but there are also single adjustments as well. And I am going to use the single adjustments. Mm, I am going to select levels. I forgot which one I was going to select. I'm sorry. But levels allows me to play around with these sliders on the bottom. This is called a histogram, which shows you where all the darks are in the image, where all the midtones are, and where all the brights are. And by adjusting these sliders underneath, these little triangles underneath, we can affect how the image looks. So if I slide over the little triangle all the way on the right, I can make the image a lot brighter because I'm increasing how many brights there are. As you can see, we can see the little lifeguard shack a lot better. However, the sunset is completely overblown now. So I'm going to reset that back. If I slide the one on the left over to the right, you can see everything is starting to get much darker. And while that makes our sunset very stunning, and perhaps that's what we want, maybe more of like a silhouette look, um, it's not really the effect that I'm going for. I'm going for a well-exposed photo. So you can see we also have the slider in the middle that I haven't touched yet. And if I move it over towards the brights, everything is going to get darker. But if I move it over to the darks, we can see we still have a good picture of the sunset in the back while also being able to see the details of this lifeguard shack. Mm, So one thing to note is that we have an adjustment layer over in the layers panel that is called levels. And if I were to click off of it, I can always click back on the levels to further adjust my sliders. So I just accessed that again by clicking on this little icon with the levels icon. Um, we also have our background layer. We can turn off visibility for either layer at this point by clicking on this little eye icon next to them. So if I wanted to see what the image looked like before my adjustment layer, I could click on this eye icon and see how dark and kind of dreary it looks. And then I can click on it to see how much brighter it looks after our adjustment. Um, I can also toggle the visibility for my background, and you can see the adjustment layer itself is completely blank, and it does nothing without the image underneath it. Okay. One last thing before we move on to our next image is we are going to save or export the image. So to save a working draft of your image, complete with layers that you can continue to edit after it has been saved, you will want to open your file as a PSD, which stands for Photoshop document. Um, This file can only be opened in Photoshop. So if I were to file, save as, I could make sure that I'm saving as the type Photoshop document, and I can save my beach photo in my exercise files folder. A little pop-up window will open to maximize compatibility, and I select it, and then we say, okay. Mm, If you want to share your image with others, though, such as posting it online for social media, you will want to export your file to a file type that is more universally recognized, such as a JPEG or a PNG. So if we go to the File in the menu bar, then click Export, we can export as, and it will open up this window, and we can save it as a PNG, JPEG, or GIF. So I'm going to save it as a JPEG and export. It's going to ask me what I want to call it, and I'm going to call it Beach After, as in after our edits. And then I just clicked Save in the bottom right corner. A very good tip, especially when you're working on a larger project, is to save as you go. You want to constantly be saving. Okay. Next up, we are going to talk about some basic image manipulation. And to do that, we are going to open our flower. So I love this image of the flower. I think it's beautiful as is. However, we are trying to teach you tools to use. So we are going to do some things that may not look the prettiest, but are going to teach you the skills that you need to continue editing in Photoshop. So, um, using the object selection tool, it's the fourth tool down in the toolbar. It looks like a rectangle with a white square in the middle with a little arrow pointing towards it. Using the object selection tool, um, I am going to make sure in my options bar that rectangle is set. And I'm going to draw a rectangle around my flower by clicking and dragging. So I clicked to start, dragged until I got to the opposite corner. And Photoshop will take a second to think about it, but it should automatically select the flower in the middle. And what I am waiting for are these marching ants uh, that should appear. There we go. So you can see it did a very good job of selecting not the entire flower, but just the petals and the center of the flower. And we have these beautiful lines all around the edges of the flower as well. So with that said, we can now do an adjustment layer as well. And this time we are going to do a hue saturation layer. However, because we had just that area selected, this time um, when we move the sliders around in the properties bar, we are going to see that the changes only apply to what was selected. They are only going to apply to the flower petals as opposed to the entire image. So what we can do is we can change the color of the flower to be green, maybe a teal color, a nice blue color. I really do like that blue color a lot. Um, Pink maybe, purple. You can see just by moving the slider, I can affect how the image looks quite a bit. So I think I'm going to go mm, with the purple, kind of that pinkish purple. You can see that there are other sliders as well. So for some of the sliders that are a little bit more bright, what we can do is we can lower the saturation of them and we can lower the brightness of them as well. That said, I'm going to keep it my little pinkish purple color. Next up, what we're going to do is we are going to make sure that the background is selected in our layers and click on the object selection tool again. And this time we are going to click and select the entire flower, including the stem and the leaves. And with just a simple click, you can see Photoshop selects the entire flower. It used to be that you had to draw around the flower in very exact, precise moments, but Photoshop has really integrated a lot of very smart tools that allow you to do the job even quicker. So with our object selected, with our flower selected, I am going to go ahead and say that I want to bring this flower out onto a separate layer. So I'm going to go to Layers in the menu bar, and I'm going to select New and Layer via Copy. Now this doesn't look like it has done a whole lot, but in our Layers panel, we can see that there are now 3 layers. Our adjustment layer on top, the image of just the flower in the middle, and then our background layer all the way on the bottom. So if I toggle the visibility of my background, you can see we can effectively replace the background now with anything that we would want. So um, with the background selected, I am going to go to File and then Place Embedded. And this is going to allow me to add a new image. I'm going to select the starry sky and rotate it. Hmm, maybe rotate it another 180 degrees. There we go. That's much better. And place it wherever I want. Once I am done, I can either click this check mark up top or the done button on the bottom. And you can see now we have 4 layers. We have our starry sky, we have our flower layer, and we have our adjustment layer, which is just affecting our flower. Um, and again, we can toggle the visibility and see what it would look like without any. Okay. Anytime that you want to do a background swap, you can just follow those same instructions that we shared with you. So you can use the object selection tool to select your object. You can either select people or do the rectangle or lasso tool and draw around the subjects that you want to highlight. You would then make sure that you have layer, new, layer via copy, and insert the background uh, as a back layer. Sometimes you may find that your background that you are trying to add to the image loads as a different layer, but you can just click and drag in the layers panel to make sure that your layer actually goes where you want it to go. Okay. Last but not least, we are going to do some finishing touches. I think this is a beautiful starry sky, but I think we need a moon. So I'm going to do File, Place Embedded, and I'm going to add the moon. Oh, not that big. Um, I'm going to click and drag to make it even smaller and maybe place it up above the flower a little bit, maybe overlapping. And again, I can either select done or the check mark. I'm going to select the check mark this time. And now we have the moon in the sky. However, it doesn't really look like it's part of the image. It looks like it was just pasted on. So in order to kind of integrate the moon into our setting, I'm going to try to lighten it up and make it seem like it's glowing. And in order to do that, I'm going to make sure that I have my moon selected in my layers panel. And then I'm going to go into this little icon on the bottom that says FX, and that stands for effects. And I'm going to add an outer glow. Oh, and that pops open a new window. So with my outer glow, what I can do is I can make my moon appear to shine very bright in the sky by changing the opacity and moving those sliders around. I can also change the noise to see how kind of pixelated it is. I don't want any noise for my moon. And you can play around with these other sliders as well. You can change the range if you want to make the moon glow wider, um, or just leave it at 50% as the default. Another thing that we can do is we can also cast an inner glow to make the moon seem bright. And if we click on inner glow, again, we can change the opacity to change how bright that moon is. And I think I want it at about 20%. Okay. And once I am happy with those changes, I can click OK. If I want to change it later, I can always double click on inner glow or outer glow in the effects and change those settings again. Last but not least, perhaps we want to make this an Instagram photo, and we would like to crop it to be a square. So we can change the crop um, by making sure that we have square selected in the options bar. 1:1 is a square ratio. And we can create ourselves a little square. And by clicking and dragging, we can really highlight our flower. When we are done cropping, we can either hit the check mark again or done, and that commits the crop and shows us what the final image looks like. Are there any questions at this time?
Right now, there are no questions in the chat.
Okay. Well, the next project that we are going to work on is going to include some basic image retouching. So I'm going to file open um, this wonderful man who is looking for a very professional looking headshot. And you can see he dressed nice. He combed his hair very well, but unfortunately, there are some blemishes that might be a little bit distracting on a professional headshot. We all have our bad breakout days, so we can definitely fix that. Um, so in the toolbar, I'm going to use the zoom tool, which is the tool all the way on the bottom. And I'm going to click and drag over to the right to zoom in. Not that much on this man's face. And to zoom out, I am clicking and dragging over to the left. Okay. So once we have his face nice and large, we can really focus on doing what we want. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate my background layer. This is something that we were talking about earlier, um, where so far we have just been doing edits that are in different layers. However, for this next tool for retouching, we're going to have to adjust the pixels directly on the image as opposed to working in layers. So I created my background copy in my layers panel, and I'm going to use the spot healing brush tool, which is this band-aid with a circle behind it. And you can see I have a little brush tool. Up in the upper left of the options bar, we see a little circle with a size. 66 actually works really well, but if I wanted to make it bigger or smaller, I could definitely adjust the slider here. What I want to make sure that I do is that any of the blemishes that I see, it completely covers them. So I think that this size of 66 will work perfectly for us. And once I am done adjusting my brush size, I can go ahead and click on any blemishes that I see. And I can click and drag as well. I wouldn't click and drag too much. Sometimes if there's a lot that you are trying to cover up with the spot healing brush tool, Photoshop will create these weird artifacts. Um, okay. And I could keep doing this for some of the smaller blemishes as well, but I'm not too terribly concerned. Um, you can also do this process for any specks of lint on clothing or any small stains as well. You can see these little white spots on his jacket. We can kind of erase away. And this little stain on his jacket can also be erased as well. If you ever do photo restoration, the spot healing brush tool is really great for any creases or tears or rips that you may have in your photos. Okay, last but not least, for image retouching, we're going to talk about teeth whitening. Um, I am not too big of a fan of teeth whitening, to be honest with you. Um, but I do want to show you how to do it because it is a very common feature that people want in their photos. So in order to whiten teeth, um, in the toolbar, we are going to select the lasso tool, which is the third tool down. And in the options bar, we are going to make sure that the second icon is selected as opposed to just the square icon. It should look like two squares overlapping each other. And when I hover over that, I can see that it says add to selection, and that's exactly what we want. Um, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in even more. Um, zoom in. The more you zoom in, the easier it is, I promise. I'm going to select my lasso tool again after zooming in. I am just going to start tracing over the outline, basically, of where I see this man's teeth. Um, And I'm going to kind of create little circles around all the teeth that I see. And I'm going to do this not necessarily one tooth at a time, but maybe one or two teeth at a time to create a full circle around them. Trying to do everything in one go always makes my hand cramp up because I can't click and drag for that long without releasing and stretching my finger. So I've got my one circle. I'm going to continue around the next tooth. And then I'm going to continue the next tooth. And you can see I'm not getting everything exactly perfect, but close enough is quite good. It's best to be pretty painstaking when you're teeth whitening to make sure that you're doing as good and thorough a job as possible. So I think that just about does it. Okay. Mm, we have our teeth selected, and I'm going to zoom out now to see what this color actually looks like with the rest of his face. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the adjustments panel. And a lot of people would actually think that you might want to brighten the teeth by using brightness contrast. I would dissuade you from that. I like using hue and saturation instead, and I'll show you why. Um, this time we're not going to play around with the hue. However, what we can do is we can desaturate it, and you can see already that the yellow that was in his teeth starts to kind of fade away and melt into more of a white color. And we can also brighten the teeth by adjusting the lightness as well. And looking at that, I would say that looks fairly natural. It doesn't look too much like a toothpaste commercial. Um, and that is about it for teeth whitening. Are there any questions now?
Our chat is still clear from questions.
Okay. Well, that brings us to the end of our demonstration. However, I did want to share some resources with you. Um, so if you go to the Plano Public Library page, you can click on Research and Learn, and this takes you to a list of all of our databases. You can scroll the alphabetical list for LinkedIn Learning, which I'm going to open, or also down here at the bottom is Udemy. Both LinkedIn Learning and Udemy are video tutorial databases, and if you log into them, mm, you will see that they have a wealth of information, including more classes on Photoshop. So if I were to search in the upper right for Photoshop, I could see that there's the essential training for 2025. It's 12 hours long. It's much more in depth than what we covered today. However, there's also some Photoshop quick tips, different courses that you might be able to take. Even if you see something that's 12 hours, don't be too intimidated by it. What you can do is you can go ahead and open up the course. I'm going to pause it. And you can see that there's a lovely table of contents here. that goes over things like opening files in Photoshop, opening from different softwares, a tour of the Photoshop interface, which we went over, or working with multiple documents. So you can click these individual videos, think of them as chapters in a book that you can just skip directly to where you want to learn. That said, both LinkedIn Learning and Udemy also have fun courses. They have courses on coding, they have courses on Microsoft Office, they have courses on pretty much everything, including what surprised me. I am learning bass guitar, and shockingly, there's a course on how to play the electric bass, um, which filled my heart with happiness. So, anything that you ever want to learn, if you want to learn it from a video, I would highly recommend both LinkedIn and Udemy. They are excellent sources for all of your learning needs. And the people who teach these courses are very professional and know what they are talking about. They are the experts that I am not in Photoshop. Okay. Mm, So we did our demo. I'm going to do a last call for questions. And if you have any questions at a later time, feel free to email me at annak@plano.gov.
Our chat is still clear. You had very clear explanations.
Wonderful. In that case, thank you so much for attending our virtual program. You can find more resources and programs at planolibrary.org, and we look forward to seeing you in our next class.